Friday, offering you the chance to spend some time in our space by hot desking alongside our residents and staff from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. So an especially big welcome to anyone who's new to the studio. Can anyone who's new to the studio put your hand up? Okay, we've got a couple of you. Welcome. This bit is for you. What is the Pervasive Media Studio? We're a diverse and collaborative community exploring creativity and technology, everything from comedy to coding and product development to performance art. And we're a partnership between Watershed, where we are right now, UE Bristol and the University of Bristol, and we're funded by Arts Council England. And what we do is we offer studio space, including desks, meeting rooms, events and opportunities, all for free to our residents as part of a spirit of generosity and mutual exchange. And most of all, we're a space for people to take risks with embryonic ideas and to make some time for collaboration. So just a few notes before we begin. Please do feel free to move around. We're not that busy today. There's a kitchen back there. You can grab a cup of tea or coffee or some water. We have a quiet space just next to this space. So to my left, that's your right, just around the corner there, there's a little door. If you need to take a break at any point, you can pop in there. There's some sofas, and honestly, at this point, too many beanbags. Yeah, it's fairly well soundproofed. If you need to take a break at any point, you'll be fine in there. If you hear fire alarm, we're not expecting a fire drill, so it's probably real. Fire exits are at the other end of the studio. So again, my left, your right, on either side. But in any event, one of the studio team will direct you to them. And then there are accessible toilets, including baby change. Don't see any babies here today, but you know, if you felt like bringing one along, in the corridor over there next to the kitchen. There'll be a Q&A at the end of this talk. So for those of you who are watching online, please pop your questions into the YouTube chat. Lautam is here. He will be your voice in the room today. If you're in the building, please raise your hand and I'll send around a microphone so the folks at home can hear what you're saying. You can get news on all of our future talks by heading to watershed.co.uk/studio, at Pervasive Media Studio at mastodon.social on Mastodon, at pmstudiouk.bsky.social on Blue Sky, or at Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram. We should really standardize our handles. Anyway, our speaker for today is Tom Marshman. Tom is a performance artist and longtime studio resident whose work honors the art of conversation and creates spaces that enable people to share their stories. His new project, This Showgirl Is Offline, reflects on his own experiences of navigating queer connection from the pre-digital era of real-life encounters to the rise of online hookup culture. And in today's talk, he's inviting us to consider how queer people navigate love, desire, and identity in an age of constant connectivity. Hard to say, Tom. And what artistic possibilities emerge from the shifting landscape. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Tom.
Thank you, Martin. So yeah, word on the street is that this talk is going to be banging. So just prepare yourself. I am a 52-year-old man with blonde hair. Is that what I've got to say? Yeah. It's very nice to be working with Nikki. We've worked together on a couple of shows before, doing BSL, and often before a show we would be putting on our makeup together. So I'm missing that today, Nikki, but we'll press on. So yeah, my name is Tom Marshman. I'm a performer and writer, and I've made theatre work for about 25 years, mostly solo theatre shows. And my practice explores hidden queer histories or LGBTQI+ stories, layered with a little autobiographical telling, and also some element of capturing community voices, community stories, other people's voices that sort of sit alongside my own and perhaps a history that I'm telling. So this project is around, as Martin said, queer digital intimacy. And it feels like I'm launching this project today for the first time, so it feels quite special. We did call it The Showgirl Is Offline, but it doesn't really sit very well with me currently. But I think there's something about finding out what the research is, finding out what you're interested in, and a title with a peer. But at the moment, I'm exploring that title. The Showgirl Is Offline, also Queer Digital Intimacy, it kind of says what it is. Queer Glitches or Queer Horizons. Maybe we could all have a vote at the end and see what the best title might be. So this project began with a sense of not knowing exactly what it is until I started. And I don't know if you're involved in shaping projects or putting things out into the world, but until you really begin to start talking about it, it doesn't very often feel real or concrete. So I think today feels like significant in that. But I definitely feel like I want to explore queer life in the digital world, explore hookup culture and dating culture, and how that intersects with aging and being authentic. So I'm coming from this material from a middle-aged queer person's point of view. That's who I am. So I definitely want to centre those stories within the work, and that is because often I felt like some of those stories have not been part of that specific conversation. So as the project develops, I'm sharing short work in progress performances or standalone kind of pieces that exist in this larger piece as cabaret performances, often in festivals or cabaret lineups or nightclubs. That's often how I make work. I try things out as I perform little sections of things in club contexts, because I find them, you know, like quite high pressure states to present that work. You get quite immediate feedback. And one thing about that way of developing work as well is I feel like quite often, if it's the kind of typical kind of cabaret lineup, I'm often the oldest person on the lineup. And it feels quite significant within this project to be developing material in that way. So the act of making feeds into the work itself, if that makes sense. Yeah, I'm getting a few nods. Recently, I was performing in a lineup at Ducky in London, and I was in the dressing room before, and there was a person in the room, and I was like, I'm sure I know you from somewhere. We must have worked together. You just look so familiar to me. Anyway, as the evening progressed, I'd worked it out that I used to perform with their mum, and it was in the 90s. So there you go. So I'm going to move to the next slide. Let's see if we can do this. I'm not the most technical person. Yeah, so this is an image of one of the tea parties that I've hosted. So as I said, my work is usually solo. It blends autobiographical, my own story, and historical research. And I'm often collaborating with archives and museums to uncover hidden queer stories. Often I host tea parties as part of the beginning of a process in a way of collecting stories from communities, often the queer community. And I find that creating these tea parties is a very democratic way of hearing other people's stories. In a tea party setting, some people like to talk and tell stories, and some people like to sort of be a bit more reflective. This allows that to happen because I always have these like paper tablecloths, and people can draw or write things that are happening or things that people have said on the tablecloth. So by the end of that tea party, I've got this brilliant tablecloth that is an archive of the conversation. And if I'm developing a show from that, then I have that as a reference point. In the tea parties, there's always these vintage teacups. There's often rainbow cake. The guests listen and reflect and draw on the table. And yeah, you have this tablecloth, it's the visual reference of the conversation. And often as well within those contexts, I often perform something, so it might be very DIY in style. I often like maybe stand on a chair, and I find this a way of really opening up conversations because it presents my vulnerability as a performer and allows other people to tell their stories. The last show that I made was called Section 28 and Me. So it was a work about the Act, Section 28, which was the law that Margaret Thatcher's government put in place in 1988. It ran to 2003, and it was a law that banned the promotion of homosexuality in schools. I'm gonna run the video now of that piece so that you can, it's just a little trailer. Oh no, this is, sorry. This is, a friend of mine wrote me a poem, which has never happened to me before. And in it was this line, "Your freedom liberates people," which I really love that line. And I felt like it was an aim of my work, so I wanted to share that with you in this moment.
Hello. Hello. I'm Tom's dad. Tonight I am going to be your guide.
A is for the act to refrain local authorities from promoting homosexuality.
Can you tell me what a lesbian is, please?
Well,
D is for dyke. One of these days, these dykes are going to walk all over you.
What would you do if you found out your sister was lesbian?
kill her.
H is for hostility. The police raided gay bars and clubs. No one would report hate crimes because of the attitude of the police. K is for kick in the gob. To walk without fear with a kick in the gob. Sing if you're glad to be gay. Sing if you're happy that way.
Tom, are you ready to come out?
Yeah, so that's the trailer for my show, Section 28 and Me. So as you can see, I collaborated with my dad on the project to be the visual describer of the work. And my dad's just got this sort of warm Bristolian voice, and he is the person that has come on the longest journey of acceptance with my queerness. So it felt like he was a very important person to work with. So as a child growing up, he'd often say homophobic things, and now he runs the park run in the rainbow colours, supporting LGBT rights. So it felt important to work with him. And the show itself blended autobiographical stories. So it had this live video feed from the dressing room, where I would sort of be more intimate confessional text, and then on stage as the sort of show person, where I perform as Margaret Thatcher, that kind of thing, as you do. And alongside that, there was some historical research to give context, and also the community engagement with the tea parties. And I worked with Brigstow as part of Bristol University to work with a team of academics to provide that kind of academic rigour and context to those that piece. So I wanted to show you that piece because it felt like quite a all the elements bringing it together. It felt like a way that I often work with, that I'm sort of honing, and a way that I can see myself navigating through this next project around queer digital intimacies. At the beginning of the project, I usually start, I say, with a tea party. At the moment, there's sort of very limited resources, so I felt like the way to do that was through a questionnaire. So I've had this sort of online questionnaire that I've been sending around to people. It's totally anonymous. You will get an opportunity to fill it out if you like, a bit later on. because I wanted to collect other people's stories, because when I perform shows, often what I'm finding is people, particularly with the Section 28 one actually, is people often want to share their story with me. They want to tell me something that feels really significant and personal. And it could be that I'm clearing away, or it could be that I need to pack up the van, or that I just want to have a drink and stuff. So those conversations don't feel very well held at that moment. So having the tea party feels a really good place to share those stories. But also to kickstart this project, I wanted to have this, this questionnaire that I could circulate around. Within my project, I'm creating new participatory formats, part performance, part discussion, to hold these exchanges. Obviously, these topics are quite taboo sometimes, so collecting stories anonymously feels like appropriate and a safe way to do that. And maybe we have... Yeah, so I'm still into this way of presenting stories. I don't know, maybe it's old hat, but just a way of like feeling the most, the words that people have used the most. And there's only been about 15 people that have responded to the questionnaire, so the participants are growing, but you can see there that, well, people is significant within the way that people have responded. Yeah. I also, in the show, which I've started to develop in a short sort of confessional monologue style, I kind of go into my own personal story, and that is my story with digital intimacy is linked a little bit with Grindr. During lockdown, I kind of noticed how Grindr was the interface. I don't know if you're familiar with the interface, but it's a grid-like system, and nobody moved during lockdown. Everyone was eerily still, except for me when I went off to adopt a rescue cat, and his name was George Michael. Well, I renamed him George Michael. And George Michael had FIV, which is HIV for cats. So ironically, my George Michael wasn't allowed to go outside, unlike the real George Michael that had a hit with Let's Go Outside. One afternoon, I opened my front door to have a sneaky cigarette, and George Michael bolted, and I couldn't find him anywhere. And I tried everything, Facebook groups, patrols, and the cat rescue people gave me this little, what do you call them? What, you wouldn't call it a trap. A cat trap. Like a basket that would slam shut if he were to go inside. Yeah, a little basket. But nothing. And then in my desperation, I started messaging people on Grindr, the people that were most close to me, and I hadn't really bothered with that before because it felt a bit like shitting on your own doorstep, messaging people so close to me. One morning, I had my Grindr notification go off, and I was very excited. And it wasn't, you know, the usual kind of pics that you might get on that platform. It was actually a picture of George Michael lounging by a skip nearby. And so I took him home and got him back in his little cat basket and took him home. And unfortunately, 2 weeks later, he died of kidney failure. So poor George. But at least we did have a perfect, I would say, month together. And it allowed me to explore other ways to use those apps like Grindr. And then after that, I actually got banned from Grindr. And I don't think it was because of George Michael. When I asked why I was banned to the help desk people, they said it was because they thought that I was under 18. Which I could see how they thought that. And then they asked me to send my passport, so I sent them my passport, and they said, actually, it's not because we think that you're under 18, it's because you've been abusive to other people. Now, I've reflected on my behaviour, and I know that I conducted myself with respect. You know, on these apps, there is racism, there is misogyny, there is ageism, and I would often take it upon myself to call that action out if I could. So I had sort of questions around this. Is this banning system, is it arbitrary? Is it about just regulation, not just numbers? How does racism, misogyny, and ageism play into these platforms? And I wanted to explore those kind of more serious topics within this work. Along with that, I've explored. Have we got some more? Oh, so this is the picture of a scratch performance that I recently did in Exeter, Phoenix, exploring a sort of showgirl persona. And this is me with it's actually an apple, but it was supposed to be a peach, but apparently it's not peach season right now. This is another peach, a half-eaten peach. And in Chinese mythology, a half-eaten peach is a symbol of queer intimacy, because one Chinese member of royalty or something passed his lover a half-eaten peach that had already been, into his mouth, as it were, and it became this kind of symbol of queer intimacy, and a peach in China is also a symbol of youth. So it felt like an interesting avenue to explore. I also have come across some research by Hinge that conducted some research around queer people and apps like this. And it said that queer people often have a pressure to perform in more masculine or feminine roles just to satisfy a partner. Half of people that use those apps, and a third of those people regret it. And I have definitely experienced that part of that culture, users wanting me to present in a more feminine way than I sit within, I guess. So I'm looking at those ideas, which comes from the sort of showgirl presentation, and also looking at Jack Halberstein's queer theory book, The Queer Art of Failure. They all feel sort of like fruitful to this conversation. So I've developed this questionnaire, and these are some words that have come to people's mind when I ask them, what are your experiences of these apps in 3 words? So we've got no strings attached, provoking, confidence, erotic, tiring, annoying, hopeless, tantalizing, difficult, successful, elegant, fun, meaningful, and then I think it says fickle, maybe. Nikki's slightly in the way of that one. Frustrated, but they've all, yes. Thank you. Fickle, frustrated, and occasionally fabulous. And then we've got secret guys, excellent. So we've got a variety of responses. On the next slide, we've got, I tend to not to think too much about regrets, but I definitely sent photos of myself to strangers on the internet that I would be mortified for any of my partners to see. It concerns me just a tiny bit that those photos are still out there somewhere. So it sort of makes you think about what is your digital archive of your digital intimate archive. Where does that live? This is another one. I feel like I'm coming of age in the wrong generation. I much prefer to meet face to face, but I'm also shy when meeting people for the first time. Sometimes I'm into the transactional nature of hookup apps. You want sex, you get sex. But now I'm craving longer forms of intimacy, and in this world of online dating, that seems like a challenging goal. I'm just going to leave those there so you can look at them while I'm just going through my notes to see what I need to talk about next. Yeah, so yeah, there's lots of questions within this project around online dating history, hookup, where is that information stored? Where, like for example, where are all my banned conversations? Where do they exist now? Grindr, then my experience with Grindr, what happened then was I got an email from a legal company that are now taking Grindr to court because they sold data. I don't know if you've heard this story in the news, but they've sold their data to medical companies and advertising companies around people's like very personal details around perhaps their HIV status or something. So I'm part of a cohort of users, old users and new users that are taking Grindr to court, which feels like an interesting avenue to pursue when you're developing a project about this. And who knows, one day maybe I might get a payout, which would be nice. And obviously there's something about this project that feels very taboo. I'm talking about things that people might not necessarily want to talk about in public. So I want to find ways of thinking about that. I'm also very aware of a sort of more global picture in terms of queer politics. In my last project, Section 28 and Me, I worked with someone called Humphrey, and they were they're a migrant from Nairobi, and for them, you know, to be on an app like Grindr actually would be very dangerous in their country. And so I feel like that is part of this conversation. I've also noticed a lack of humanity within these apps, and people mirroring themselves or looking for oneself in these apps, people treating other people like robots, and questions about what is taboo, what is exciting, what is sexual, and what is human. Seeing these, have we got any more? Yeah, we've got a few more. Some profiles are spot on, some underrate themselves, some overestimate. Another one, I'm happy to be what anyone wants me to be. Sometimes online is easy and sometimes the sauna is perfect. So I wanted to talk about my next steps within the project, But before I do that, I just wondered if anyone had any reflections of their own experiences or anything that they wanted to share from some of the responses that I've already collected and gathered. I don't know if there's anything that anyone wants to share in the room at this moment, or anything that might be appearing online at the moment, in this moment. Yeah.
Thanks. Hello. I guess it's more just something that I was thinking about as you were talking. I wonder if you've read the book Analog Cruising by Leo Herrera. He talks about dating apps, Grindr, and the book is, I guess, a how-to guide on cruising and cruising spaces, different kinds of cruising spaces, and a resistance to, or I guess an addition to queer spaces beyond Grindr. He's quite critical of it, which is quite resonant.
I think there's something about, like, being critical, but also aware what benefits those places do hold, and actually they can be exactly what you want if you have a particular kink or fetish. You know, like, you can find it there no matter what it is. It sort of short circuits or fast tracks that way of finding the person that you really want, because you're all there for similar reasons. But there's also a reduction of that, like, interpersonal humanity stuff, I think, yeah. So my next steps for this project are, next week I've got a residency at Battersea Arts Centre, and I'm exploring queer ageing and role models. And when I think about queer ageing, I'm sort of drawn to actresses of a certain age. So my reference points are Gloria Swanson in Sunset Boulevard. Don't know if you know that. More up to date, Demi Moore in The Substance. Pamela Anderson in The Last Showgirl. I want to return again to this questionnaire that I've created, and some of these sort of very short sound bites, some of these like little interview pieces. What would happen if they were turned into like more sung choral moments that could act as a way from segueing from one scene to another. So working with a, choir mistress person to develop those verbatim texts into sung pieces. I'm also working around, the folklore and the myth of the Chinese mythology about the peaches that I've kind of uncovered and quite drawn to. And I'm calling this biblical chaos. So when I look at some of those biblical stories, and I'm thinking more of, I would think I say this wrong, Salome. Do I say it right? Salome? Yeah, I'm saying that right. Salome, so she was the person that ordered the head of John the Baptist on the silver platter. And when I think of these like chaotic stories of desire, they kind of reflect my experience and stories that I've heard about apps like Grindr. So I want to like create a kind of interface, maybe it's projected onto gauze, where people can play out these characters of these like biblical stories and tell these different stories in a way that feels current. Maybe that exists on gauze, maybe it could exist on a 360-degree cinema, or do we need to, in this current fragile artistic climate that we're living in, maybe we just have another pandemic and go back to Zoom. It could work on that format. But ultimately, I want to make a show that resonates with the current climate. I want it to be playful, I want to use the limited resources that I have and the way that I make work, so taking small sections of that work and presenting it in clubs and festivals and cabaret lineups, building on that. I want to connect with those communities, so host more tea parties with queer communities, hearing their stories. I want to think about that kind of more global picture, and to make the piece that I want to make in this moment. So that sort of concludes my talk. I know that what usually happens is there's questions, but I've got some questions for you, which you could choose to answer, or you might have questions for me. So my questions are, what parts of this conversation am I missing? There are quite a lot of different things: Chinese mythology, queer theory, playing masculine, feminine roles, digital human community stories. How do I make these all meaningful within this work? So those are my 2 questions.
Thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you. There is as well the questionnaire that you can fill out if you're interested, or send to a friend who might be. So yeah, hopefully that goes right through to the questionnaire.
Does anyone have any questions or answers for Tom? Ready.
Thanks, Tom. I was wondering about, because you talk a lot about Grindr, but like obviously the lesbian dyke experience of apps is like quite different. I feel like maybe we've even talked about this before. But there's a sort of, I guess I'm wondering if you're going to explore that, is like my main question.
Yeah, so the through hosting the tea parties, I would collect those stories. So you've got this kind of like, if I look at the show Section 28 and Me as a way of like a sort of like a blueprint of making a show, you've got my story that kind of runs through it, and then you've got all these other stories of all different types of people and their experiences that would be sort of informing, talking to my narrative, yeah. Through also the questionnaire, people can respond to it in a way that they're telling their own stories. So those stories might be developed into songs, and so they would exist alongside my own, I think.
Have you thought about digital places to have those conversations as well and gather those stories?
Well,
like WhatsApp groups, or, you know, there's all those little tendrils, isn't it?
The questionnaire is obviously a digital questionnaire.
Yeah, but
it's
like
anonymous.
the chat, you know, like, you know, on an app, you're like chatting with someone else and like it's developing and growing, maybe, or it's not, and then you meet or you don't. And I was just wondering if you thought about, I don't know, that bit of it as well, the digital intimacy part, rather than doing it in person. Like maybe there's some digital intimacy growth. I don't know.
Yeah, so I am on another app now that Grindr banned me. I'm not going to tell you which one because I don't want to be inundated with messages from you all. But when I've had those conversations with people, they obviously feed into the work because, you know, I'm an artist, everything feeds into it, but I also have sent them the questionnaire. I mean, yeah, those spaces are particular.
I think I'm very reflective about this because I was chatting to someone on Hinge yesterday and they sent me this long description about a time in history that I know a bit about. I got really excited and sent them a 5-minute voice note, and I think I've killed it. And it's just stuff like, you know, there's a lot of those sorts of stories. Yeah, anyway.
Yeah, so...
There's a way we could extract that.
So, yeah, is there a way of talking about that story in terms of like a biblical, like, can we draw an analogy? Like Salome falls in love with John the Baptist's voice. Maybe the person that you were messaging had the opposite effect on your voice. I don't know. I don't want to put any words into their mouth.
I'm sure we could find a mythological comparison.
But yeah,
sure.
I'm interested in how we tell these stories in different ways. And yeah, as I said, I'm sort of right at the beginning of this process. I'm trying to work out what it is. I want it to feel like it's not just about me, but I'm the kind of like the way that people can, well, what was that phrase? My freedom can liberate conversation, or however it was. Like that feels very present for me. Like how I address my stuff with without shame, speaking about taboo, actually will hopefully liberate others. So my story is very dominant and will probably still remain so in order to make people feel like their stories are still relevant.
Yeah. Yes, all right.
I know you said that people often approach you after your shows and you don't quite have the time to talk to you then. And I was just thinking about that link with religion that you mentioned. And could you incorporate a sort of confessional booth within your shows? Give someone that time to come and speak, but they have the privacy of, you know, being in that confessional booth. But then it's a chance to draw those conversations out a little bit, maybe.
I think that's a brilliant idea, and maybe something that, yeah, it would be hard to. It wouldn't be so hard, but it could be hard to manage. And what I found is that people want to speak to me. In particular, not a confessional booth. Like sometimes people have actually, literally, I've walked off stage and they follow me into the dressing room to tell me their story. So it can be quite hard to manage that. But I love that idea about a confessional booth. Yeah. But does that also sit into the act of presenting some kind of shame around those stories, or is it just an appropriate way to tell something that you might not want to? Like, what does that? That's a question. Not that I want you to answer that, but you know, it would be a question within the process, I suppose.
Yeah. Nice. Awesome. Thank you.
Really?
Actually, following on from that. I think there is an element of shame in a lot of online interactions where lots of people have blank profiles and things, and you could explore that within maybe an online confessional where you didn't see who it was. But also, there's an element of masking who you are, or that online persona allowing you to be somebody you don't feel you can be in real life. And I wonder if there's any way of exploring that. I'm sure there's some legends or fairy tales you could do about doppelgangers or appearing as something else other than you are.
But also that made me think about, like, one idea that I've had is like, if it's like, you know, like a packed auditorium full of audience members, and I do this kind of like pre-show workshop with a group of like 6 people that are there to facilitate those stories, and they're sort of amongst the audience, and they're on this sort of interface app that feels a bit like Grindr or Her or whatever app it is, like, and people are amongst you, you know, like that would feel quite exciting, I think, to be in the room and spontaneous. And also play into that masking anonymity thing.
Michael.
When you mentioned Halberstad's Queer Art of Failure, I'm thinking of Goffman's presentation of self in everyday life.
I've only heard that, but I haven't. What was the
Goffman, the presentation of self.
government presentation of self?
Goffman is the
Goffman.
author's name. Goffman.
Oh, Goffman.
Irving Goffman.
I don't know it, so I'll look that up.
It's a nice short paperback from about 1958, and it's basically the sociology of how you present yourself to different audiences in different ways. And the masking that you're talking about is that kind of like, he talks about the front stage that you project on, and then the person behind that is gathering up the next role that you're going to play. I mean, you know, if you look at sort of people going into their workplace, putting on their telephone voice, as they call it, rather than speaking in their natural accent. And it then strikes me that your online app is a place where you curate a very particular version of yourself. So it strikes me as being a sort of series of masks. You put on a mask for that audience, and then you take it off to do other parts of your life and then put it back on again, as opposed to the sort of...
and does this text, is it about the digital world, or is it about
this is 1958.
Oh, yeah.
So this is well pre that kind of thing. And I think that's what makes it interesting, is that you've got that sort of human, natural behaviour that then evolves against the technology that comes along, 40 years later.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, that's another question as well, isn't it? Is it evolving against, or is it evolving alongside? Like, are those traits of how we present ourselves in the digital landscape, are they actually present in the 1950s, but we haven't...
But in a different form.
Yeah, in a different form. Yeah.
You know, it's like the Strictly Come Dancing. You know the modern thing of voting, public voting, and a set of judges. Actually, if you go back to the very early days of television, you voted by postcard. But the format was roughly the same. And I think, and that's one of the things that fascinates me as somebody who's looked at technology over the years, is that if you can get to the human behaviours, you can start to predict what people are doing from the basic sort of sociological, psychological needs.
Yeah, and it has a really interesting, historical placing.
Yes.
Thank you.
Anybody else from the audience?
Hi, just a quick question. Are you going to consider now, with the advent of AI and these avatars now that are going to be used, obviously, as the ultimate power fantasy of the Silicon Valley use of AI is to have just these avatars that used as a replacement eventually of the dating apps in some cases?
I'm a bit deaf, so I can't hear you very well.
It's not. It is on its own for the people at home.
Yeah. Are you asking me about how AI plays into it?
Yeah, if you're going to consider it as part of the project as well, yeah. As an end game for the dating apps, potentially, in some cases.
Yeah, I guess I haven't considered that much at the moment, but I think it would be definitely worth considering. In terms of getting AI to have a conversation with a profile, like that sort of is the first thing that springs to mind, really. And then what happens if two AIs are having a hook or a potential hookup together?
That definitely would be a good show.
Yeah. Could that be something that is live? Like, if you're creating a theatre show, like, could that be live in the room with that?
Yeah, no, that definitely could work. Or someone playing this game in a social event, and not one of the acts being, or one of the participants could be an AI, whether someone notices at the end or not.
Yeah, I guess the interesting thing about AI is when humans tend to make things like more chaotic and messy, AI tries to always like pacify it, in my experience. Do you think that's true, or? Yeah. It sort of mediates things, tries to make things present two sides of the same argument, or doesn't it? I think, my experience. And what you want is like
more chaos.
More chaos to represent what it feels like.
Well, that's also another good point for that. If AI is trained on what is a largely a straight cisgender culture, well, AIs that cater to LGBTQ people will be pretty biased against in that respect. So.
And it feels like when you're thinking about AI and queerness, like we need to stop it and start from scratch, so that those queer, more diverse conversations, like minoritized people, can actually shape a future instead of presenting everything in a more, sorry, I'm not being very coherent, but in a more heterosized form. Yeah.
Thank you.
But that's interesting and definitely worth thinking about in terms of this work.
Any last questions from the room?
There's nothing online. I thought that there might be people that would be desperate. Are they? They're masking.
All right, in that case, let's say thank you to Tom. All right, just before you all go, if you do want to stick around in Hot Desk today or find out more about what we do, please come find one of the studio team. Right now, that's me and Loughton. We'll be happy to help. If you're watching online, please drop us a line on studio@watershed.co.uk with any questions. Thank you all for being here today, and we'll see you again next time.
Thank you.